a song for ya.
You're listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I will do one episode for each song the band recorded in the studio. However, this is a fan podcast and not band endorsed. It's more of a tribute to their long history, well beyond just the hits, and my way of giving something back to a band that has given so much to me. Let's dig in! Hello and welcome to episode number 61 of Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, here bringing you another song on our journey through Machine Head. Still on side one of the proper album. We're talking about the song Pictures of Home today. I do remember, I couldn't find it, but I do remember an interview with Ian Paice where he talked about how the intro came to be for this song. There was, and I think it's on the Roger Glover remix side CDA on the 25th anniversary, but the original ending of it was a little bit different. The end of the opening, I should say, because it's percussion opening. But the band got very confused as to where to come in. So he had to kind of change it a little bit to where he does 4 flams on the snare and then they come in on the next one. So that kind of just, gave everybody a starting point and a cue to go, okay, now I know where you're at. You can bumble around all you want. You're going to give us that 4 count and then we'll come in on the next one. So, I found that interesting because they all seem to be really good at knowing places, and on a lot of these odd things that they do, they know where to come in. So it's interesting that threw some of the people off to where that had to be rewritten. I wish I could have found the interview, but what I do have instead, going back to Rockline of 1985, I do have somebody that called in and asked a little question about Pictures of Home. Let's check it out.
We're going to play a song from Machine Head that's called Pictures of Home, and this is another one of those songs that I understand has a fun story that goes with it. What's the scene behind this song, you guys?
This is recorded in the same time we recorded Machine Head album in Montreux, Switzerland, in a hotel corridor. And at the time we were doing this, the way we used to write is the same way that we write now. The music comes first, and then we put the vocals over it. And John Lord happened to be sitting in the control room when Ian was recording the vocals. And there was one phrase that he came in laughing about. Do you remember that phrase in the song?
Emptiness, eagles and snow.
Emptiness, eagles and snow, which at the time had little meaning, but of course had much greater meaning when you finally heard the song. But it's one of those lesser-known songs, and this is one of the things we were talking about earlier.
By the way, Roger has just fallen off his mind. This is total.
I know,
and I know nothing.
It's rolling around the floor right now.
I know I'm pushing reality a little bit.
He's never had a vice-like grip on reality, has Roger. But anyway, play the song, Bob, and let's see what happens, huh?
There's our cue. This is Pictures of Home.
Yeah, so you get that 4 count right at the end there before the band comes in. And what an incredible opening. I mean, I can only imagine that this came out of just kind of playing around on the kit, doing some jamming or a warm up or something like that. And then you come up with this thing, you're like, hey, that's pretty neat. I think I want to develop that into something. And the next thing you know, you have an intro for a song on a Deep Purple album. Does it get much better than that? I don't think so, but that's just me. Killer opening. I've always loved that. That's one of those things that drummers listen to and they're like, okay, I need to sit down and figure out how he did that. Because those flams are fine on their own, but keeping up with that rhythm, knowing that there's only one bass drum, there's got to be a rack or a floor tom that he's hitting in there. So to hit that and then come back so cleanly on the flam is not a very easy thing to play. Now, for you non-drummers out there or non-musicians who aren't familiar with a flam, it's basically, instead of hitting both sticks together at the same time, you hit them slightly apart. So it sounds a little bit thicker than a single hit. They're just like slightly apart where you can barely slip a piece of paper in between the two of them. Really close, but definitely not exactly hitting on the same time. That's a flam, all there is to it. And you can hear it's a double hit on the snare very cleanly. And I think that's what gets me about it, is it's so clean. I did go back and check out the other version that you get on the 20th on the anniversary edition of Machine Head that Roger did. It is a different opening. It's a 5 count instead of a 4. I had forgotten that's what it was. And I think that might have been what threw everybody off, because normally you'd have a 4 count on a 4/4 song, and then you'd come in on the next one. But being that it's a 5 count, or the first count starts on the 4th beat of the previous measure, for those of you musicians out there, it must have thrown everybody off, because you would think the first count is not on 4. The first count would be on 1. So yes, that would be a little confusing. Personally, I think it'd be fairly easy to get used to, but what we get in the final version, and maybe this is for the benefit of the audience too, is that we just get a clean 4 count. 1, 2, 3, 4, song starts. We're all in together. So maybe it worked out for the best for everybody. I don't know. That's really up to you. It doesn't matter though, because it is what it is. We got what we got. So not only do we have this amazing drum opening, we have an incredible riff. I mean, it's so colorful. It's got so much feeling in it. And then just that little burst from Richie with that double tracked picking. Oh, this is just fantastic music to me. So just to take a little bit of a step back, during the riff, we've got 2 different parts that the rhythm is playing. We've got the main lead that Richie's playing. In the background behind it, you have John and Roger are playing a different rhythm. Richie's going da 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 da, and John and Roger are going dun da 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 dun da 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 da, and it's what we're going to hear later in as the rhythm of the song. But that's a really interesting thing, that they're not all ganging up on that lead. Then when it slows down in the second half of that, I shouldn't say slows down, but it gets a little simpler in the second half of that. They actually just follow da da da, and they're just playing those notes instead of doing a rhythm behind it. So they switch off rhythm, straight notes. Richie plays his double track part, and then we get right into the vocals. So again, not a long opening, just enough to introduce the song. Ian Pace warms up the band. Everybody jumps in. Then we get Ian Gillan. Very much the way that Deep Purple's been doing things as we've seen so far.
Somebody shouting up at the mountain, only my own words return. Nobody's up there, it's a deception. When will I ever learn? I'm alone here with emptiness, egos and snow. Unfriendliness chilling my body, and whispering pictures of home.
I've always thought that the verse was double tracked, or I can't imagine they would have used a doubler like Paul McCartney does, but it does sound similar to that. But I think Ian's, a good enough singer, and they probably just had him do it. That makes more sense to me. And then we've got the harmony. I love the way that they divided that, where we have just, the double track verse on the vocals, and then those harmony parts where it goes, when will I ever learn? Like just the placement of those decisions is absolutely art to me. Beautifully done. Love the sound and the feel of that, especially that when will I ever learn, and the way that they drag that out a little bit. Just put such an intensity in the feeling of it. Again, not just the words, but the way that you say them. And he's really bringing out a little bit of that isolation he's talking about, a little frustration that he should know better as we're getting in the story. I've always, I shouldn't say always, because for the longest time, I had no idea what this song was about. And then I would take, I'm alone here with emptiness, eagles, and snow, just saying like, that's really the only thing I have. I'm up in the mountains, and there's really nothing else here for me except for these things that aren't even really, things that are here for me. They're just what's in the environment. The eagles don't care about me. It's just emptiness and snow. So that's always what I've taken it to mean. But I guess John was just struck funny by it for whatever reason. And that's fine. I mean, sometimes you hear a thing and you're like, well, that doesn't sound right, or that's kind of funny when it's out of context. But musically, this is just so amazing. I mean, we've got such great rhythm going on. behind the verse, just the interplay between John Ritchie and Roger is just, it's just such a groove. Normally when we think groove, we think drums and bass, right? But here is just this like rhythmic pocket that they're all playing in. That's just, it's such a great background. And I really kind of want to just like lay in that sauna of music and just enjoy it because it's so killer. And then, obviously as we're transitioning back, getting ready for the next verse, we've got just another great fill from Ian Pace, really powerful organ. Just such a great song. So once again, there's our regrouping point, that wonderful double picking we're getting from Ritchie. And then really cool, just nice, simple fill from Ian Pace that just feels so good for this transition. I don't think he could have written anything better than that.
Blind me, how can they find me? Maybe they don't even know. My body is shaking, anticipating the call of the blackbird roll.
I mean, we're not even halfway through the album yet, and I feel like we're already being served dessert from an audio perspective. This is just fantastic harmony and emotion. One of my favorite all-time Ian vocals.
I'm alone here with emptiness, eagles and snow. Unfriendliness chilling my body and taunting with pictures of home.
This song just feels so fluid. The motion on it has been nonstop, and it's such a good groove. They're really locked on here. Question to you guitar players, how in the hell does Ritchie's E string survive this solo? I mean, that is some incredible playing on it, really pushing the limits of where I think that thing is just going to break at any time. Flawless fluid playing once again from Ritchie, and this is one that I feel like maybe he had a couple of spots picked out where he knew he wanted to be, but for the most part, I feel like with most Ritchie solos that this was just very spontaneous. Absolutely love it. But I have a bone to pick because really this goes back to our last song where I said, why is the guitar solo panned so far to the right all of a sudden? And then the second solo is more to the center where John's solo was. So here, it's not really a bone to pick on this song, but more again, emphasizing the point about the last song, because here it's exactly where it's supposed to be. It's just right of center. So we're getting organ, we're getting rhythm guitar, which it feels like it's kind of hard to pinpoint, but it feels like it's very much to the left, but it doesn't feel like it's so far to the left that the mix is unbalanced. That's what's really weird. Could just be the balance between the organ and the guitar, but it's very interesting panning. Really the sound feels nice and full, but the guitar stands out just enough. Volume is perfect. It's enough to where it's cutting through. And again, he's playing on frequencies that the other instruments are not. So, they're going to cut through a little bit anyway, but the volumes are right. The panning is right. Like, this is an excellent mix.
Here in this prison of my own making, year after day I have grown into a hero, but there's no worship. Where have they hidden my throne? Oh, I'm alone here with empty.
I really appreciate the way he breaks that up, because it's not just where have they hidden my throne, it's throne, and there's like a little bit of a breath in there that kind of gives it just a bit more emphasis and a little bit more, I don't know if it's regret or desperation, but I'm definitely feeling an emotion there. And such a great line. You know, again, this is the second song where he's kind of admitted, this is my fault, you know, here in this prison of my own making. I really like that. That's such a great line. And it's just great lyrics.
Mosquitoes and snow, unfriendliness chilling my body, and screaming out pictures of
Not to be outdone in the least, we get a fiery solo from Jon Lord. Starts off really simple, kind of the typical Jon Lord solo, a little bit of repeating, a little bit of space here in between the parts, and then he just, goes off, and I absolutely love it. I would like just a skosh more in the mix would be nice, but obviously we could hear everything he does, and really it's only the beginning of it that's a little bit quiet. Once he starts doing those doubled runs up and down, we get really enough volume to hear him. But I could use just a little kick at the beginning. Really, really cool. And then just a huge build from the band, especially coming in from Ian Paice and Jon Lord together at that last part before I stopped it, as we're getting ready for another solo. My God, what an amazing bass sound. I mean, that is just so thick and crunchy. I absolutely love it. And it's interesting because when you hear the bass through the rest of the song, and they might have boosted it a little bit for effect here in the solo, but you're not getting specifically that bass sound because it's blending in with everything else. It's blending in with the distortion of the guitar, the distortion of the organ, which that combination changes the sound of the bass. But hearing it isolated like this, just absolutely incredible. And chef's kiss to the performance. I've always loved this solo. It's so, I hate to keep using the word fluid, but all the solos have been fluid. The song, the way that they're playing the rhythm and keeping up with it, it's just seamlessly moving along forward just fine. But there's something really magical about how he's just jumping in notes from one spot to another. He's not just going up and down the scale. He's not just skipping a note here and there. He's picking some very interesting spots to make this solo very colorful. Yeah, I mean, they're just on fire at this point. And again, this is another one that I just want to chase to however long they played. They could play another 5 seconds or another 10 minutes, and I would have been there for all of it. But here we go back to now the guitar is panned very far to the right. It's a little too quiet. I don't understand the inconsistency in the mix of the guitar solo here. Even if it was a different track, it doesn't make sense to put one solo slightly right of center at a good volume and then the other solo further to the right at a lower volume. It's very inconsistent and confusing, because I think if this would have been panned slightly right of center instead of further to the right and just a little bit more volume, I think this would have sounded fantastic. So I'm really confused as to what's going on here with the mix. But performance-wise, this is killer. I love that whole false stop. It's a very different riff. It's something that you would not expect. That particular ending and the sequence of notes that they chose, really cool. And then just great, long, consistent fill from Ian Paice coming to bring everybody back together and say, hey, we're not done. We've got more, and just kind of ramp everybody into it. Absolutely wonderful. Something really different. They're changing things up from song to song, which I love. They're not verse, chorus, bridge, solo, verse, chorus, out. They're not doing the typical progression of songs. Everything's got something a little bit unique to it, and they're a very interesting band to listen to. I mean, I've given so many reasons as why I think Deep Purple is set apart from all these other bands, and I have to wonder if, even on a subconscious level, some of these things are not part of the reason that they've become such a big iconic band, because they're not doing the same things that other bands would do. Even today, where I would say structure-wise, they might be a little more straightforward, but they're coming up with things, they're throwing things in there that, are just really unique to this band, no matter who's in it. So I love that. But speaking of the sound, I've talked about that sheen that we hear over the album. And I forgot about this. When I was looking for the interview talking about Pictures of Home from Ian Paice, I did come across something else that I'm going to play from you now. This comes from, I believe it is Enter Talk Radio. It's either Vinyl Night or the Vinyl Guide. Not sure what exactly it's from specifically, but anyway, let's check it out.
Everybody knows the Smoke in the Water story and the Montreux and everything. And, you were talking to me a couple of weeks ago about, how once, you guys moved over to the Montreux Grand Hotel, everybody in the band were converting the hallways and stairwells for Machine Head. My question to you is, what setup were you using, and where were you put? How did you deal with that?
Well, like lots of hotels, there was a main long corridor, with the bedrooms off left and right. And there was this little T-junction where there was a little tiny room, 2 rooms off to one side. So there's a tiny corridor off the side. So we blocked off one end of the big corridor with bed mattresses we'd taken out of the bedrooms. We blanked off the other side because you're in an echo chamber basically. So you're trying to control the reverberations in there by killing it a bit. And then we put the drums in the little arm of the T, and it was just if I remember right, it was either my Black Oyster Ludwig or it was a Silver Sparkle one. It might have been a Silver Sparkle one, which was my first American kit. So that'd have been a 68 Ludwig. Same thing, 22, 13, 16, regular kit. And we actually had a really nice ambient sound in the setup. It was really very nice to play with. But when we finished the album, we were having so much fun mixing it, we forgot we had these 2 ambient tracks. That's why when you listen to the record, it's so tight and close and in your face. You really are 2 inches away from the snare drum. That's the way it sounds.
Right.
But when we went back to do the remaster 25 or 30 years later, wherever it was, we found, what are these 2 tracks here? We brought up all this room sound, which is what we meant it to be in the first place, and we just totally forgot they were there. Quite amazing.
Well, maybe that was a good mistake in a sense, because it is in your face and people feel that, you know.
Yeah, and of course, you know,
But-
because it's that close, you hear all the little nuances, you hear all the little drum lines, you hear the little drags, the little push notes, you hear everything. Now, you know, admittedly, if you make a mistake, that's in your face too. But luckily, there weren't too many on that, and it sort of sits very nicely. But also, when we did the remix, you had a choice of the original, or you can have one with the ambience tracks, and they both sounded good, just totally different, you know.
Right. Were you tracking as a 2 or 3 piece at that point, and then overdubbing the essentials, or was everybody playing?
We'd still do it the same way today. The backing tracks are all four instruments going on at the same time.
Okay.
In those days, you know, if you did make a big howler, then you had to stop and start again. You know yourself now. If somebody makes a howler today, you complete the track and you see what you've got, because you know it can be fixed. But we try and get some interplay on the backing track, which you only achieve when you're actually doing it together. It may only happen for a couple of bars in a piece of music where, you know, I put an axe on the bass drum and Roger hits it with me and Don goes against it. Something that you wouldn't plan because it makes no sense, but when you hear it back at that moment in time, it's perfect. And if you don't play together, you're not going to find those little things. So we try and do that because it's really important. You might not do it. You know, you might do a whole album where you don't find them, but when you do find them, it just holds the whole thing together and saying, okay, this is a band that played it together. And I think that's really nice.
Well, yeah, I agree. And again, I don't even see a lot of that in today's time. So,
Well, that certainly gives some a little bit of background on the sound of Machine Head, and maybe a little bit of why I feel it had that mellow overtone, because you didn't have the big room ambient overheads, which would have given it some clarity, I think, a little bit. Also, though, talking about the way that they write together and why they need to be in the same room, I find that very fascinating. And you know, when you think about it, when we get to Turning to Crime, it's really amazing that it came out as well as it did, because they didn't have the opportunity to have those moments. Everybody recorded separately. So I wonder how different that album might have been had they all been able to be together in the same room. But I'm grateful they did it, because, you know, COVID was a very long time where they were unable to get together. And yet they still found a way, considering that they're a band that needs to be in a room to jam together, to write together, to create together. Was really grateful that they did the Turning to Crime album. And I think the only way they could have done anything during that time was to do a cover album. So it really did make a lot of sense. I'm glad they didn't rest on their laurels and just, you know, sit around. I think it also kind of gave them a little bit of fire too, to, you know, not say, you know what, spent the last 3 years at home, kind of enjoyed it. And I kind of don't really want to go back on the road now. I've settled into a new life. And I think maybe that album was a way to keep them active and keep them energetic and miss that connection with each other and want to come back and create more. I don't know, but I hope so anyway, because I think it's a great album. I was really surprised, but we'll get to that down the road. It'll be here before you know it, the way we're flying through these episodes, or the way I'm flying through these episodes. You know, it's funny. I'll go for like, you know, I'll do a bunch of episodes and I'll realize like I'm 6 weeks ahead. I can't be that far ahead. And so I'll like back off for a week or two. And then I'm like, I look back, I'm like, God, I'm flying through this stuff. And then I'll do a couple more episodes. I'm like, wow, these things are going so fast. But yet like the timeline is not really moving that fast, but it feels like it. But I'm thoroughly enjoying digging into these songs, hearing all these little things, and, you know, really paying attention to what's going on, to the mixes, to the performances, stuff that I've always kind of, you know, I hate to say it because I feel like I know these songs fairly well, but I'm realizing that there's some element of us that takes music for granted because we kind of go, I know how this song goes, and we stop listening for new things. We just hear the song we know after a while. And that's okay. I think that's just normal human behavior. But I think every once in a while, we need to just maybe give something another focus. I've been amazed as I've gone back and listened to different music, especially soundtrack music. But, you Steve Jablonsky, who's one of my favorite soundtrack composers, and he does so much layering that when you really dig into what he puts into a piece of music for a film, it's really amazing what's all in there. Sometimes just these little subtle things that you might not pick up on unless you're really paying close attention. But if they weren't there, it would feel empty. And I feel like Deep Purple is one of those bands that would often just, you hear Richie throwing in these little things here and there. And I think sometimes we just tend to know that they're there and hear them, but not really hear them. You know what I mean? So I think it's worth every once in a while to just sit down, listen to your favorite music, but really listen to it. You don't have to be listening critically, but just really appreciate what was put into the music. I think it's nice to do that. And it helps you appreciate more when you find new things in it. That song you've been listening to for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you're like, wow, I forgot that was in there, or I didn't realize that was in there. That is so cool. I mean, how can you not love a song even more when you find cool and exciting things like that in it? So that's my suggestion. I'm sorry I wasn't able to find the interview clip from Ian Paice about Pictures of Home. I really would at some point like to find some time to go through and catalog all those interviews and just kind of mark down what's in them like I did with the Rockline stuff. But I'm sure I have it somewhere, unless it was on a video. If it was on a video, I probably don't. I just, these are like interviews I've downloaded from podcasts and different radio specials and stuff. So I might have it somewhere, but I was not able to find it. So anyway, what's important is the song. We got to listen to Pictures of Home, really cool song. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And man, we're flying through Machine Head. We'll get to the next one on the next episode. We'll see you guys. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast, a tour of the entire Deep Purple studio recordings. Please remember to give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Leave a comment and tell your friends. I also have a Patreon set up if you'd like to support the show. You can also write to me at smokeonthepodcast@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and thanks for listening.